Alarms do not sound like alarms anymore. They sound like screaming. And the screaming is coming from Compression Bay 7, and I am the only one standing still. My name is Owen Hale, and 30 seconds ago Captain Ilana Marsh grabbed my arm so hard I felt the bruise forming before the pain even reached my brain. Behind her, 2 engineers were on the floor, hands pressed over their ears, rocking, though there was nothing loud enough to explain it. The lights along the corridor flickered in a rhythm that made my stomach twist even from 50 feet away. That was the chamber. That was what it did to people now. We were 9 days from a reactor bleed that would kill every soul on this ship, and the only fix sat behind a door that had already broken 4 crew members without laying a single hand on them. Captain Marsh did not waste time on comfort. She never did. Her voice was flat and fast. "Reactor coolant junction," she said. "Inside the bay. 40 minutes of work if nothing goes wrong. And everything always goes wrong in that room." She needed someone to go in, patch it, and come out before the resonance took their mind apart the way it had taken apart Petty Officer Callum Bright 2 days earlier. Bright still would not speak. He sat in the medical bay staring at a wall, flinching at sounds only he could hear. I looked at the bay door. Thick metal, scratched from panic, someone's fingernails maybe. A sign bolted crookedly to it that used to read Cargo Storage 7, now half torn off so it just said 7, like even the label had given up trying to describe what was inside. I said I would go. Nobody argued. Nobody offered to come with me either. That told me everything about how bad it had gotten. The suit they gave me was standard pressure gear, nothing special, no protection against sound or light or whatever strange combination inside that bay had turned it into a machine for breaking people. Engineer Priya Solanki ran the final checks on my oxygen line with hands that would not stop shaking. She did not look at my face. She looked at the door instead, like it might open on its own. 40 minutes, she said. "If you are not out in 40 minutes, we are venting the bay to space and writing you off." Ship policy. Nobody argued that either. The door slid open with a groan that did not belong to any machine I had ever heard, more like a throat clearing before a scream. I stepped through, and it sealed behind me with a sound like a held breath finally released. The first thing I noticed was the gravity. Not gone, not full, something in between. So my feet touched the floor but my stomach floated half a second behind every movement, like my body could not decide which world it belonged to. The second thing was the light. It pulsed at a speed just wrong enough that my eyes kept trying to catch up and never could, so every shadow in the room seemed to jump sideways when I was not looking directly at it. The third thing was the sound, except it was not a sound at all, not one my ears could name. I felt it in my back teeth, a low grinding hum that lived somewhere below hearing, and my whole skeleton wanted to run even though nothing in the room had moved. I understood immediately why 4 people had broken in here. This place was built to make your body scream danger while giving your mind absolutely nothing to point at. No monster, no threat, just wrongness, endless and shapeless, and nowhere to aim your fear. I walked toward the coolant junction anyway, boots clanking against a floor that felt like it was tilting even though every sensor on my suit said it was level. My name kept repeating in my head, not because I was losing it, but because saying my own name is something I do when my body starts arguing with my mind. Owen Hale, 3rd shift, fixing a junction, that is all this is. Halfway across the bay, something changed in the humming. It deepened, dropped a note, and every hair on my arm stood up at once. I stopped walking. I made myself breathe slowly. 4 counts in, 4 counts held, 4 counts out. A trick a flight instructor taught me years ago, before my first jump into a storm system that killed 2 other pilots that same week. The chamber wanted my fear to have no shape, so I decided to give it one anyway. I told myself the hum was just an old machine complaining, nothing more. A broken fan somewhere behind the wall plating. Annoying but not dangerous. It was a lie maybe, but it was a lie with edges, and edges were something my mind could hold on to. I reached the junction panel and knelt down. My fingers found the release clips through the gloves, 3 of them, cold even through the padding. The panel came free with a hiss of trapped air, and there it was, the problem. A cracked housing no bigger than my palm. Coolant weeping out of it in a thin silver line that caught the flickering light and threw it crazily across the walls. That was when the room decided to try harder. The lights cut out completely for 2 full seconds. In total darkness, the humming climbed into something almost like a voice, wordless, close, wrong. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt it in my throat. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to get to the door, to bang on it until someone let me out. I did not move. I have jumped out of burning aircraft. I have sat in a life pod for 6 hours with a cracked oxygen seal, rationing my own breath in careful sips, waiting for rescue that was not guaranteed to come. I have learned, the hard way, more than once, that fear without a target will eat you alive if you let it drive, but it cannot actually touch you if you refuse to hand it the wheel. So I sat there in the dark, junction panel open in my lap, and I did something that surprised even me. I laughed. Not a big laugh, just a short huff of breath, because the absurdity of it hit me all at once. A room. Just a room. Bad lighting and a hum and some gravity plating out of alignment, and it had taken down 4 trained crew members like it was some kind of monster. The lights flickered back on. The humming settled back into its lower, steadier grind. Nothing had actually happened. Nothing had touched me. My hands were a little unsteady. Sure, adrenaline does that to anyone with a working nervous system, but my mind was still mine, still pointed at the job in front of me. I pulled the replacement housing from my tool bag and started the swap. My fingers worked through muscle memory, the same motions I had practiced 100 times in training simulations that never once included a room actively trying to unmake me. Old housing out, seal cleaned. New housing seated. Coolant line reconnected. 12 minutes had passed. I checked the suit clock and felt a strange, calm satisfaction at how normal the numbers looked, like the room outside this one, the one with the panicking crew and the countdown clock, still existed, and still made sense. Then my body did something my mind had absolutely not agreed to. It got tired. Not the ordinary tired of physical work, a deep tired, the kind that comes from 3 shifts without real rest, and a body that had just spent 12 minutes convincing itself not to run screaming. My eyelids grew heavy in a way that felt almost funny given where I was sitting. I actually laughed again, quieter this time, at the absurdity of feeling sleepy inside a chamber that had shattered 4 minds. I finished tightening the last connector, checked the readout on my wrist, saw the coolant flow stabilize into a smooth, even line, and realized I had roughly 20 minutes left before the automatic venting protocol would trigger. 20 minutes was more time than I needed to walk to the door. It was also, apparently, exactly enough time for a short rest. I want to be clear that this was not bravery. It was not some grand act of defiance against the chamber. It was closer to something my grandmother used to say, that a tired body does not ask permission from a nervous mind. I folded my arms on the deck plating, rested my head against them, and let my eyes close. The humming continued. The lights kept flickering in their broken rhythm. None of it stopped. I simply stopped listening to it as a threat and started hearing it as background noise, the same way you learn to sleep through traffic outside an apartment window after enough nights in the same city. I do not know exactly how long I slept. Long enough that when I opened my eyes again, the ache in my shoulders had eased, and my heartbeat had settled into something slow and even. I stretched, felt my spine pop in 3 places, and stood up. The chamber had not changed. The wrongness was still there, patient and shapeless, waiting for someone to hand it a reason to grow. I simply was not offering one anymore. I gathered my tools, sealed the panel back into place, and walked to the door. It groaned open the same way it had grown shut, and the sudden light of the corridor felt almost blinding after the strange pulsing dimness of the bay. Captain Marsh was waiting exactly where I had left her, though her face had gone through several emotions in the time I had been gone. Relief came first, quick and real, then confusion, because the feed from the one working camera inside the bay had shown something none of them could easily explain. Priya Solanki spoke first, voice unsteady. "We saw you stop moving," she said, "for almost 11 minutes. We thought the chamber had gotten you like it got Callum. We were seconds from calling it." I told her the truth, because there was no reason not to. I said the room had thrown everything it had at me in the first 2 minutes, and after that, there was nothing left to throw that I had not already decided not to be afraid of. I said I finished the repair, checked the clock, and realized I still had time to spare, so I used it the only way that made sense to a body running on fumes. I slept. Nobody laughed at first. Then Priya did. A short disbelieving bark of a laugh that seemed to break something tight in her chest, and after that the whole group seemed to loosen at once, shoulders dropping, breath coming easier, like my calm had given them permission to feel it too. Captain Marsh studied me for a long moment, the way she studied damage reports before deciding how serious a problem really was. Then she asked the question I had been expecting since the door first opened for me. She asked how. I told her what I actually believed, which is that fear needs a shape to survive. Give it teeth, give it a face, give it a specific threat, and it will chase you forever. But strip that shape away, refuse to hand it a monster to become, and it eventually runs out of places to grow. The chamber had tried to become something formless and endless, and the only way to beat something formless is to refuse to give it form in your own mind. Call it a broken fan, call it bad wiring, call it, if you have to, simply a rude room having a bad day. Anything with edges is something you can survive. Anything shapeless will eat you only if you let it stay shapeless in your head. The reactor bleed stopped that night, coolant flow steady and even, readouts glowing a calm green on every monitor in engineering. 9 days of dread collapsed into a single line of good news on a status board, and the crew who had been flinching at shadows for a week finally allowed themselves to breathe out completely. Callum Bright started speaking again 3 days later, slow at first, then more steadily, and eventually asked me, almost shy about it, what I had done differently in that room. I told him the same thing I told the captain: refuse to name your fear something enormous, name it something small and manageable, even if the naming is a small lie, because a small lie you can carry is better than a formless truth that carries you instead. They stopped calling it Compression Bay 7 after that. The crew started calling it Hale's room, half joking, half not. Because apparently the strictest possible safety test a chamber could pass was a tired man deciding, quite calmly, that it simply was not worth the energy of being afraid. Engineers rerouted the coolant lines properly within the month, realigned the gravity plating, fixed the lighting circuit that had been flickering at exactly the wrong frequency for human comfort. The bay went quiet, ordinary, forgettable, the way most dangerous places become once the actual danger has been solved. I still think about those 20 minutes sometimes, not the repair itself, which was routine work any trained engineer could manage, but the moment right after, when I had time left over, and a body that simply refused to keep running on empty. I think about how the chamber had been built, whether by design or accident, to exploit every instinct a frightened mind relies on, and how none of that mattered once I decided the fear did not get to drive. People ask me sometimes if I was not scared in there. I always tell them the truth. I was scared. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. My hands were not perfectly steady, but scared and controlled are not opposites, not really. You can feel the fear completely, and still refuse to let it choose your next move. That is not the absence of fear. That is simply choosing, again and again, second by second, not to hand it the wheel. These days I sleep better than I used to, oddly enough. A room that once broke 4 trained crew members without lifting a single mechanical arm against them taught me something no simulation ever managed. Rest is not weakness. Rest is a decision, made in the middle of danger, that says the danger does not get to define every second of your existence. The reactor still hums quietly somewhere below deck, steady now, healthy now, the kind of sound nobody notices anymore because it no longer carries any wrongness in it at all. And somewhere in engineering, a small sign still hangs crookedly on a door that once read, Cargo Storage 7. Someone added new letters beneath the old ones in careful handwriting. It reads, quite simply, safe enough to nap in. I suppose that is as fitting an ending as any story about fear could ask for.